So here's a little fun fact for you. Did you know that once upon a time, there was a politician that potentially hold AIPAC accountable just a tiny bit? And that person was actually JFK, who back in 1963, as you're about to see in this breakdown video this guy did, is going to show you how AIPAC was almost forced to register as a foreign agent. Just like how we have to do with Russia, with China, with Canada, with Britain, like any nation outside of your own has to be considered a foreign agent. But except for Israel and Saudi Arabia, apparently, our two greatest allies. And what this guy is about to show you is once upon a time when there was a person brave enough that stuck their head out and called out this foreign lobby. They knew that there was going to be trouble afoot. Some stuff happened. Let's just say that. Listen to this.
Have you ever wondered how we got to this point where one of the biggest lobbying groups in America can openly brag that they are representing a foreign country? This is from AIPAC's website, but somehow they don't have to register under the FARA Act as someone acting on behalf of a foreign actor. They literally brag about how many millions they spent and about how 98% of their buying of our politicians was successful this election cycle. Did you know that they were actually this close to having to register as a foreign agent before a certain thing happened? Here, I'll show you, and I'll show you where you can find all these primary sources too. So if you go to this URL right here, israellobby.org/AZCDOJ, it's a history of when AIPAC almost had to register as a foreign agent. And back then, they were known as the American Zionist Council. Right there, the American Zionist Council. Well, it turns out that President John F. Kennedy was about to force them to register under FARA. And this is a history of all of the original documents that pertain to the legal case. And when you click on any of these links, it'll take you to original archived sources of the actual documents from the actual testimonies that you can read. Even cool little snippets like this that say federal lawyers are near a decision on whether to require the AZC to register as an agent of the Israeli government. And back in June and July of 1963, the federal government was nearing a decision requiring the American Zionist Council registering as an agent of the Israeli government. Americans of whatever faith believe firmly that America is their country and America alone. The Zionist lawyer, Mr. Lenvin, advised that public registration would be injurious to the American Zionist Council. You might notice that the Honorable Donald Rumsfeld was involved. And as 1963 went on, it all heated up. And by October of 1963, they were saying things like forms are enclosed for the use of the American Zionist Council in registering under the Foreign Agents Registration Act. But then what happened in November of 1963?
There's a cover-up that's about to happen here.
The president who was spearheading the whole thing just suddenly wasn't there anymore. And to be clear, I would never infer that Israel had anything to do with that whole thing. I'm just saying it was really convenient timing that it happened to turn out that way. And then in December of 1963, we get this document. As you know, our client is not prepared to register as an agent of foreign principal or to concede that it is subject to the registration requirement. December 11th, 1963. And to this day, the single most influential big money group in Democratic electoral politics is not registered as a foreign actor. Although the U.S. Justice Department clearly states that FARA requires the registration of anyone that represents the interests of the foreign principal before any agency or official of the U.S. government. All the rest of that also applies. That's just the most obvious statement. Because if they were registered under FARA, they would have to disclose where all the money's coming from. And They don't want to. So they just don't. And that's how we wind up with screens like this. And with AIPAC openly bragging on the internet about how they pay to get candidates to win, despite their policies being clearly unpopular with regular people in America. And that's why it's so important that we stop China from subverting our democracy by controlling what we see on our social media apps.
Yep.
You feel me?
That was a good ending. Yep, that's why it's important to ban TikTok. According to who? The ADL, the Anti-Defamation League. The people that are brought to you by another formation of the AIPAC lobby. That's why it's so important to do that. That's why it's so important to shut down college campus protests of students exercising their rights and abilities to freely assemble in peaceful protest. That's why it's so important. That's why it's so important to have a bunch of pedophiles running in Hollywood. That's why it's so important. Because it's all China, right? It's all Chinese communist propaganda, right? Or Russian Vladimir Putin, the KGB. Oh, well, actually, it was all kind of Israel for many decades. In fact, the whole formation of it is relative to the disformity of the entire democracy of the United States and other allied nations that they continue to blackmail into. So, there you go. Some interesting little factoids there, and I'm sure that this anti-Semite here, no doubtably there's going to be some tricks up the Mossad's sleeve to hack his phones and all that stuff. Thank God he doesn't have a pager, because we know what happens with that. But I didn't know about that. I surely wasn't aware of our JFK even having any insight into registering Israel as a foreign lobby. Like, you tell that today, you say that to anyone today, after what, RT had to go through, what the BBC and Al Jazeera and all these other mega corporations, they just took down African Stream from social media platforms. They're dismembering parts of the African media from informing their public, and because they're foreign agents. But here you have the Israeli lobby, one of the biggest lobbying firms of any foreign influence around the world, openly stating that their biggest powerful influence out there. And no one has any sort of retaliation or any sort of sticking their head out to call any of this out. They tried to do that. But a lot of those people get their careers canceled. They get, bank accounts frozen. They get exiled from society because this has been going on for so long. They become so corrupt and so powerful, so unchecked, that this is now part of it now. That if you say anything incriminating or anything exposing this horrible lobby, you are targeted with the worst thing imaginable. And that's scary. That's scary. How can you live in a sovereign nation and call yourself a Canadian or an American or any part of the world, knowing that you are being controlled? You're being controlled by foreign influence of this magnitude. And the last person that really tried to do any sort of remote effort by just referring to them as a foreign agent so they can't clamp down on our democracy. As I said there, I'm not going to jump the bandwagon either, but it is kind of a coincidence that it all came to play and then November 1963 happened. Just kind of interesting in that way.